Ladies and gentlemen, let me open a regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Pearland for March the 5th, 2018. Can't believe the seasons have gone by so fast. I'm still trying to do my Christmas shopping. But if you'll please rise, we'll have an invocation tonight. Councilmember Keith Ardno and our police chief, Chief Doyle, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
If you'll please bow with me. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us together this evening to do the work of this wonderful community that we all call home. Please protect those overseas and at home that are protecting us. Protect those that serve us every day to make this community the wonderful place it is. In your name, amen.
Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pledge to the Texas flag.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
We appreciate all of you being here tonight. We sometimes, in the fall of the year, we have Monday night football, so we don't have that tonight. And so it's we're focusing on what the city is trying to do tonight. Maybe we'll make a few touchdowns and points after. But thank you for being here. I know that your busy lives, and it's always great to see citizens and visitors to our city council chambers. Moving in our agenda to item number 3, and I'm using the same agenda you have. Roll call. We do have all of our city council members here with bright and shiny faces. Item 4 is to call out for citizen comments, to give an opportunity for our citizens to speak some of the thoughts that they have. And we'll proceed with that now. I'll ask our Mayor Pro Tem, Councilman Reed, to present these for our consideration.
Thank you, Mayor. And good evening, everyone. I'm going to call everyone up that submitted a request form, a speaker request form, one by one. When you get up to the mic, please state your name, your address, and you're limited to 3 minutes. And so I'll make sure to give you a warning when you're down to about 1 minute. The first person is Mr. George Sanders. Good evening, Mr. Sanders.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the council this evening. I want to talk about Cherry Street. I came to talk to you about 6 months ago about Cherry Street and the need for improvement on it. By the way, my name is George Sanders. I live at 2402 Francis Drive in Pearland. That's a Mimosa Acres subdivision. Mimosa Acres is defined by Cherry Street on the north, 518 on the south, Francis Street on the east, Woody Street on the west. It's the oldest subdivision in Pearland and the least driven by the city council. I suspect none of you have been over there lately, all right? Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Cherry Street. I talked to you about Cherry Street, and 2 things have happened since I talked to you. First thing that ended up and happened is I got a call from a young lady in the transportation department, said that they were going to end up and do a survey of the drainage. They didn't want to get caught with like what happened on Orange Street. And then they were going to end up and they would repair the chug holes periodically until they ended up and came to the point that they could do something with Cherry Street. Since then, I don't know if the survey for the drainage has been done. I can tell you that 90% of the homes in Mimosa Acres flooded during Harvey, primarily due to the drainage district facility and their entry to Cherry Street over the drainage district, over the drainage portion that was there. The other thing that ended up and happened was truck came by, had a drilling machine on the back of it. It drilled either a 4 or 6 inch hole. I did not measure it, but I just going by an estimate, drilled it down, and then did a survey of the compaction of the dirt underneath the street. They ended up, finished their survey, they ended up and filled the hole, put cold asphalt in the hole, and left.
About 45 seconds left.
That hole now is 30 feet, 30 inches wide, and 30 inches long, and 20 inches wide, and 4 inches deep, and not filled with cold asphalt. All right. The street, the people come by with a cold asphalt. They put it in the hole. They pack it down. First rain that comes by, truck runs over the top of it. That asphalt pops out. The hole gets bigger. I looked at the mayor's speech to the chamber about the status of the city, and Cherry Street was not on his list of streets to be worked on. I would ask the city to end up and to find some way to fix our street. Several years ago, they had what I call a Zamboni machine come in. They did a 120-foot stretch on Cherry Street. I asked them if they were going to do the whole street. They said no. They were just doing a test. They then went off and did the whole of Woody Street. Woody is held up very well. That section they did on Cherry is held up very well. It turns out, I'd like to see you do it again. All right? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Ruby Sanders. Good evening, Ms. Sanders.
Good evening.
Please state your name and address.
I'm Ruby Sanders. I live at 2402 Francis Drive. I'm talking about Cherry Street, but from another perspective. We know that you do not have any plans in the near future to fix it, so we want to preserve it. And to preserve it, we have to realize that it is a thoroughfare. We are not a sleepy subdivision road now. I took some surveys just out my window sitting at my breakfast table and counted the cars. In 4 hours, we had 131 vehicles that were not dump trucks. We had 67 dump trucks in those 4 hours go down that road. Now, that road is not designed for that. One other time, I decided the dump trucks went for 4 days. For 50 minutes, I counted, and there were 16 dump trucks and 35 cars. What's happening, we have become a cut-through street. They come from McLean across 518 down Halbert. We do have a stop sign there, which they may or may not observe. If there's no cars coming, they just slide on through, come down Cherry. The last time that the city had a clicker out there to mark the amount of traffic, it was way down near Woody Street. It needs to be from between Halbert and McLean, but Halbert and Micaiah, because that's where all the traffic is. These people want to miss the red lights, and they're using our street. So to me, you need to reevaluate that this has become a thoroughfare. I do not think you're going to change people's habits or trends, so we have to do something to preserve our street. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders. Next, we have Ms. Kay Hauser. Good to see you again, Ms. Hauser.
Thank you.
Please
And I heard
state
from Mr. Owens. I'm Kay Hauser, 2807 Honeysuckle, Rocheron, Texas. I'm not going to give you a long speech today. I'm just here to thank you for allowing us to come and express our concerns about different areas of the city, and especially with Section A, with the annexation. I know that it's a formality, you allowing us to come and speak, but I really appreciate you doing that. Mayor Reed, City Council members, I hope today when you go into executive session that you really think about making the right choice. I know you've probably heard from the district attorney. I know I've heard from the district attorney last week and with Brazoria County. And I know that that there's been some odd things, but, somebody asked me the other day when I left the meeting here, if one of you were to have car trouble, would I stop and help you? And my answer was yes. I'm human just as well as you guys are, and I would stop and help you. I don't have a problem with that, and I hope there's no animosity with that. But, you know, what we found that Pearland City, and I won't say the city council, just the rules and regulations, they just weren't followed. If you'd dotted your I's, crossed your T's, and just, you know, made sure everything was there. But school district notification is one thing just right off the bat. The Texas Government Law Code 43.905 will tell you that's it. It'll stop it right there. It can make it void. You know, and not only with that, it was, you know, the changing of the document or the altered document, whether it was a typo or not. You know, that's just another story. But the DA, we have her ear, and I know you guys have talked to her. So I'm just hoping everybody makes the right choice. And just know if you have car trouble or anything, come out to our area, or if I can catch you anywhere else, I have a kind heart. I would be glad to help you with whatever. But please do, when you go into executive session today, make the right decision, do the right thing, and if you want us, do it right. Make it a voluntary annexation like it should have been, not involuntary. Thank you again.
Thank you. Arun Submarinian. And forgive me if I didn't say the last name right.
You got it right, sir. My name is Arun Subramanian. I come from 2829 Westchester Circle, Pearland, Texas 77584. And thank you for giving the opportunity to speak to the City Council. The reason I'm calling is because the gate has been put up on the FM 518 side of Westchester Circle. Now what happens is I take my mother-in-law to the senior center in the mornings, and it's a nightmare getting on 1128 and turning left. There's so much traffic there on both sides. So there are more chances of getting an accident, getting into an accident when I make so many turns, number one. And the second point is, I was made to understand during the initial signature of putting a gate that this will be an electronic gate where actually the residents would have electronic access to open or lock the gate. But what happened was, we were made to understand that way, and that's why I put my signature. Later on, we were told that it could be a manual gate. So it's basically being tricked in one way to signing for a thing which actually was not there, which did not happen. Those are the 2 points I want to mention. I'm a neighbor. I've got many more points to mention, so keep it till holiday. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Luke, and I don't even want to try to get the last name in, but Luke. Beard. Well, how do you say it? Beard. Beard. Luke Beard. Okay.
Yes, sir. My name is Luke Beard. I'm from 2726 Westchester Circle. It's the house that's, I guess, right next to the brand new cattle gate that was installed. At least that's the closest thing that I could identify it by. Is if you look at the pictures, it looks like a cattle gate. Whenever we were first told about this idea, about this gate that would cut down on the traffic that was using Westchester Circle as a shortcut, it sounded like a good idea. But I guess what they've put in is something that, 2 concrete K-rails would do the same thing. And it's pretty unsightly, and it's caused kind of a problem for me, mainly because I'm right next to this thing. So if it's not people that's parking at the end of the street, it's people that are parking and going to O'Reilly's or to Toddenberry's, or sometimes they just park there and they come back for their cars later. Of course, the first question would be, well, how come you don't call, PD and have them come and take a look? I don't want to make anybody mad, and have them come back to my house, and who would they think is the first person that's going to be complaining on them for parking at the end of the street is going to be me. So, trying to keep my family safe and trying to make the best choice out of a really hard matter is, decisions that I make. Another problem that we're having is people are, I guess, led down this road through their GPSs and their vehicles and their phones, and they get to the end of the street and it's blocked off, and they're pretty upset. And there's been people that's peeled out, and I've gone out there to try to talk to them and try to let them know, and You know, I've been flipped off and cussed at, and I've had people ask me to open the gate. I'm like, well, buddy, I don't have a key. I hope the right people do have a key. Do the right people have a key? I mean, you know, fire and EMS. So that's another question that I'd like to hope it's not just bouncing around at the bottom of someone's cup holder in their vehicle. So that's another thing. I guess on the lighter side, the grass on the outside of my street, I'm sure y'all are all looking at this. It's kind of turned into a mud pit, and I guess an eyesore would be an understatement because it looks pretty nasty. And it makes Pearland look pretty nasty. I think that gate really does diminish the property value of Westchester Circle as a whole. And I don't really see any positives about it. I mean, you really did cut down on traffic, you know, making its way all the way through Westchester Circle, but the traffic has not stopped. There's still people that come down there and they're turn around and they're upset. You should have seen the UPS driver trying to figure out what the heck was going on the first few days. So I guess it is something that everybody has to get used to, but I don't want to get used to it. Another gentleman came and talked to me, and he thought it was pretty funny, which I didn't think was funny at all. He told me that there was a law that I might be able to use to my advantage and to the advantage of the rest of the people in Westchester Circle. I know that this was something that people signed up for, like Mr. Kumar, he signed up for it because they told him there was going to be an electronic gate. Who wouldn't want that? Be able to get in out of their neighborhood? So whenever the cattle gate it looks like a cattle gate, right?
I'm gonna have to ask you to wrap it up pretty soon,
So,
pretty quick. Yeah.
Whenever the gate was put in, you know, this was not something that we asked for. We were proposed with something different. And later we were told that, oh, this couldn't be done because everyone would have to form an HOA. It's like, well, you know, that's gonna be how much for everybody a year? And I don't know. Tell me what y'all think about it. Would y'all want this right next door to y'all's house?
We can't do a question and answer, but I'm gonna have to ask you to wrap it up.
But
Yeah,
of course the answer is gonna be no.
understand.
So,
But
thank
thank
y'all
you for your
having me.
comments. Thanks.
my time's up?
Yeah.
All right. Y'all
Thank you
need
for
any
your-
more of these? I got some. Yeah, I guess I printed this. You got my original.
Next person is Miss Elaine Thomas. Good evening, Ms. Thomas.
Elaine Thomas, 2727 Westchester Circle. All right, thank you. I didn't realize we just had 3 minutes. I had an agenda concerning my property. This was the last thing that culminated that I said I've got to do something. The value of our properties, mine has been seriously affected by other things other than the cattle guard that Mr. Beer just talked about and Mr. Kumar. I have pictures. I was told when I called about the city meeting to take pictures, to have 12 copies of each, which I have. And I was not told, as I said, would be limited to 3 minutes. So I have wasted all these pictures.
No, ma'am. We'll take the pictures if you want to go ahead and have them passed down.
There are different views of the cattle guard, and I have the measurements of this gate, as Mr. Upton called it, not a cattle guard, how it extends over onto our properties, the Beards and mine. We are actually the only two physically affected by this. The measurement from the cinder block wall there by the new business, I'm sorry, I don't know the name of it, it's a real estate company, Next to me is 84.5 inches set in onto my property and the Beards. I believe that's well over the 5-foot easement that's on my side and 5 foot on their side of where the business is. It also extends from the street onto my property 94 inches. So it's well setting on the property. These homes the aesthetics of this is so bad, plus the traffic problem it's creating more than the traffic going through Westchester Circle. It's created much more of a problem. But the aesthetics is terrible. These are not spec homes. These are not low-income homes that you put this across from.
You have about 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Well, that interrupted what else I had to say. One other thing is that this cattle guard gate, whatever we want to call it, is interfering with a driveway that has gone back to a RV cover on my property since the 80s or before. It's actually over onto the driveway. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. And thank you, everyone that came out to speak tonight. I'll go ahead and pass it back to the mayor for the rest of the agenda.
Okay. Moving along in our agenda, item number 5 is public hearings. There are none tonight scheduled. Item 6 is a consent agenda, and these are items, you remember, that are usually like minutes and things that are low interest that the citizens agreed to put on the agenda some years ago and passed by 96% to make it go faster. And sometimes we'll have as many as 16 to 18 of those, which would mean we'd have 16 or 18 different items. But the consent agenda tonight will be presented to us by Councilmember Carbone.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action, approval of consent agenda items A and B. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Or then the discussion on that item. Hearing none, we do have a motion second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Ordinance?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens? Motion passed 7-0.
Okay. Moving in our agenda to item 8, matters to remove from the consent agenda, and there were none tonight. Moving to item number 8, new business. Councilmember Moore, would you present item number 1 for our consideration?
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration possible action resolution number R2018-46. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Number 1 is a financing arrangement for the Lower Kirby Management District. This is one of the special districts that is used in the city to get things done for development and otherwise that wouldn't otherwise happen. This district is reached sufficient value that they can issue bonds and will repay for water and utility improvements that have been made there. Those monies were fronted by the city through agreement with the PEDC, and I believe Lynn Humphreys from the law firm for the district is here and has a brief presentation for you. 5-star there.
Okay, does the council have any question?
Mayor, we got a quick presentation if you don't mind.
She got up, so we're going to be here. Okay,
I
see you in a minute. Or
No, the presentation's good, so we need to hear it. So this is one of the first ones, I think, if not the first, for the Lower Kirby district. So I think it's important to go through that and some of the financing, some of the background for that. So
yeah, and for the record, Lynn Humphreys with Allen Boone Humphreys Robinson. We're general and bond counsel for the Lower Kirby Pearland Management District. There we go. I was asked to just explain a little bit about why the cost of issuance are different for a special district than they are for a city. I think the last time one of your city approvals came up for a special district, you had a city bond sale at the same time, and so I was asked to explain some of the differences. I've also provided to Matt Buchanan a flash drive with a presentation that Julie Peak with Hilltop Securities, who's the district's financial advisor, did for the state legislature that really explains it. It's 19 minutes. I'll warn you in advance. My presentation's much shorter, but it is something, if you're interested, it's really good testimony, and she really does a great job of explaining it much better than I could do tonight. And Greg Lentz, her associate, is here also from Hilltop. So, you know, the MMD, the Municipal Management District that was created over the Lowick-Kirby area, formerly Spectrum, provides the infrastructure cost of that new development so that the city taxpayers don't pay the cost of the new development. This is true for all special districts. They're bearing the cost of the new development infrastructure costs, so the city, current taxpayers don't have to. Lower Kirby's proposing, as you know, to issue just under $3 million in bonds. These are to fund water, sewer, and drainage facilities. And are the cost for financing of special districts higher than the city? Yes, they are. And I will try to explain as best I can why. The special districts, to my knowledge, are the only of all of the bond issuers in the state that are regulated by an agency of the state. Unlike the city, which has the power to issue bonds on its own, just go to the Attorney General, or school districts, we have TCQ regulation. It's very broad-based, but it's also very meaningful. The rules impose very strict tests to ensure that special districts can support the bonds that are proposed to be issued. And as a result, since those rules were implemented in 1989, there's not been any default on any MUD bonds since then. So it has been a good change that the rules are in place. There's a lot of analysis and cost that goes involved into the regulation and the oversight of these special district bonds that other issuers in the state don't have to do. Specifically, we have TCQ economic feasibility test. We have bond applications that are quite significant that have to go in for most of our bonds, not all. We have cumulative debt-based tax rate tests that are imposed by the TCQ. We have additional regulatory documentation that's required to be submitted to the Attorney General's office for special districts that is not required by other entities. It's supplemental and additional information. And then for road bonds, we have special Attorney General tests for road bonds and for percentages of debt to value that have to be submitted. We have to take into account the city debt in that as well. Special districts, unlike cities or other larger governmental entities, do not have staff to perform these tests. So the financial advisor, in this case Hilltop Securities, and in my case ABHR, perform and fill these roles that normally you might fill in-house with your finance director or your city engineer or your city attorney. All of this analysis, the financial modeling, the planning, the documentation that has to be submitted to the TCQ, the regulatory filings that have to be made, the regulatory documentation that has to be made to the Attorney General's office, and the rating and insurance applications are all handled by the bond counsel and the financial advisor. And these costs are not charged hourly. They're reflected in the fees charged per each bond issue as opposed to hourly. I suspect, without doing the numbers, that if in the long run it's less expensive for the Lower Kirby Management District to not have full-time staff to perform that work, where you have overhead and benefits, rather to capitalize those costs in the bond issue, I suspect is less expensive for the districts to do. We are the smallest of all the issuers in the U.S., to my knowledge. We average, with our special districts, bond issues from about $1 million to $6 million. There's obviously exceptions to that, but that's an average. There are economies of scale every time you do a financing of larger issuers and larger volume. There's always economies of scale. For example, the Lower Kirby district bonds since inception are only $17,400,000, including this bond issue. Just in 2017 alone, the city issued 146 and some change million in bonds. Just lots of economies of scales to spread the cost of issuance out over. All bond councils have sliding scales based on the value, and the percentage goes down. For example, ABHR goes from a 3% down to a 0.5% based on the volume of sales, because the work is done, sort of whether you're doing a smaller or a larger issue. They're just different markets than the cities, and unlike the city, which was, I think, established in the late 1800s, Lower Kirby is a new entity, and so Lower Kirby has to establish its credit. It takes a long time to establish that credit. Therefore, there are, it's hard to get ratings, especially for Lower Kirby, because right now it's very undeveloped compared to other districts. That results in higher interest rates, at least a basis point, and perhaps higher as we're expecting, I think Greg said, these bonds to maybe sell at close to 4%, whereas I think the cities are in the mid-2s right now. Special districts often have to purchase insurance to reduce their rate, which reduces their debt service payments, but it increases the financing costs to purchase insurance. And then there are some costs that the cities do not have that a special district does have. We have to pay state-imposed regulatory fees for bond issues. We have to include 12 to 24 months of capitalized interest in the bond issue, whereas the city's last bond issues don't have any capitalized interest. For both bond market reasons and for TCEQ requirements, in special districts, the infrastructure is pre-financed. In this case, the city has done the pre-financing. There are developer interest payments that have to be made for people who finance. They are less than the borrowing rate that the developer who is pre-financing has. They're limited under TCQ rules. There's also an examination of all of the expenditures that have to be done by an independent auditor, and those costs are an issuance cost of the bonds. The market for special districts requires an underwriter's discount, usually of about 3%. For example, the city's underwriter discount for one of its bond sales is about 0.5%. And then the last chart is just, I know it's hard to read, but you do have a flash drive of it. But these are the actual costs that this particular bond issue will incur, broken out. You can see some of the differences I've talked about between the underwriter's discount for both, no capitalized interest, the issuance costs and professionals fees. Sadly, that is not all ABHR. Those fees are actually divided between bond counsel, the financial advisor, the bond issuance. All of the bond issuance is expensive. The cost of disclosure counsel, we hire a separate securities law expert to review the documents, the photography that's involved in the offering document, the reimbursement audit, the printing of it, etc. And then we have, in this case, the bond application report. And the state regulatory fees are to the TCQ and the Attorney General. So hopefully that answered some of the questions you had about why the cost of issuance are just different markets, but I tried to break it down working with Julie Peak as best I could for you. So.
That's an interesting presentation.
Well, I tried to make it as short as I could. It's shorter than 19 minutes.
Council have any questions that weren't answered already? Tony, we're
Thank you,
going to
Mayor.
turn it over to you.
All right, I'd just like to thank Lynn for that presentation. It makes it a lot clearer as to the difference between the city's issuance and the special district. So thank you. And unfortunately, I don't have any more questions. You covered it all.
It's a pleasure, as always, to come to the city of Pearland. It used to be my second home, and now I have a bunch of younger lawyers that I work with, so I haven't been here in about a year, as someone on the council reminded me.
Yeah. Does any of the council have any further questions, or even staff that have a question?
Yes, Mayor. I guess we can't go back to the last slide as easily. Oh, maybe we can. So in this, the issuance costs of professional fees, the $184,000, that's analogous generally to what we would pay for our bond for counsel, for bond counsel, and for legal counsel for ours, correct?
Yes, you have a 0.28% on your, because you don't have some of those fees that are in there, you don't have.
So in general, would it be fair to say if we're issuing out $2.5 million in COs, that our fees would be roughly about $184,000, and then the other fees would be on top of that, and that's where we see the differentiation.
Yeah, I don't know that for sure. Maybe Greg can answer that question. I know that there are different statutory requirements, both at the state law level and at the Attorney General's office, as to the documentation that you do for a certificate of obligation. It's a more simple process than you have to do for here, but so I don't know exactly what you do, and I don't know how much is in-house.
Well, let's say for a bond issuance, would we say that $184,000 for the same value would be the same for a city having a bond issuance as opposed to a special district having a bond issuance? That value would be about the same.
I think
correct?
if you took into account and allocated a value of the time that is spent by your finance department and your staff at the finance department and your in-house lawyers and your engineers, you know, it would be probably at least that, but I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
Not really, but what I'm trying to get to is, what is the same cost that we would pay versus what a special district, and what's additional to that? And this is more kind of directing towards staff. Is there an easy way for that to be communicated in future packages with respect to special districts? Here's the analogous costs that we know are would be the same for the bond issuance that we would send out, and here's the additional cost, so that we can see the differentiation. Or to be honest with you, this question will come up in the future. So it gives us an opportunity to have an apples to apples comparison. And what I'm not seeing in here is where are the apples and where are the oranges. And I thought that the issuance costs and bond professional fees, that's the apples to our apples, and the rest are the oranges. And
it's
so,
not. And there's economies of scale. And so if this were a larger bond issue toward the sizes that you all do, then the percentage would be less, because there's economies of scale for the work. You have sort of the same work, slightly more because more documentation for larger, but the bulk of the same work. And so that's why bond councils always have sliding scales that go downward. So I don't know what it would be if you sold a city bond issue of just under $3 million. You don't have the TCQ application cost. You don't have the regulatory fee that you have to pay to the TCQ on top of, you don't have to do the bond application. You don't have as large, you have a substantially less underwriter's discount. You're not going to include capitalized interest. So the problem is you're not really comparing apples to apples, because they're just two different financing birds.
okay.
So.
Well, if there's a way that we can try and get it to where they're on the same level, so this is the same plus this, to give us better information as to why there's a differentiation.
Sure.
For future councils.
I'm happy to work with Cynthia Pearson and try to figure out what we can do to make it more clear.
I'd appreciate it. Thank
Sure.
Does our economic development staff feel comfortable with this at this point? Good. I got that.
That's a good presentation.
It was very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I doubt that, Woody.
I'm sure you got some hot air still left in there.
Well, thank you so much for your presentation.
Well, thank you, and I really want to credit, Greg Lentz, who's here for helping do the presentation, and several other younger lawyers in our office that helped.
Good. Thank you. That's it sounds complex, but it's very worthwhile and very, very quite simple when you get to understanding it. I think it's something does that apply to more than just small districts? We've got small districts that could be about more than just, we're doing it for South Spectrum.
Well, it's a great way for the city to not put the burden of new development cost onto existing taxpayers.
Yeah, and I think
there's a cost to doing that, but it is, I think, fair to it's fair to the new development, and it's fair to the existing taxpayers.
Well, when we build roads, we've got to get a consultant engineer group to do it for us and help build it. So I thank you very much for your time and taking time to explain that to us. Appreciate that. Council, have any further question or comment on this item? Clay, do you have any added
No, sir.
comments at this
Thank
point?
you. Nope.
Okay, good. Council have any further comments? I don't hear any. Tony, did you have a wrap up?
Mayor, I guess following up on the last meeting, part of this financing is for what, Hooper Road reconstruction. Is there any, the last meeting we did the adjustments on the payments because the engineers screwed up the front of curb, the back of curb. Is there any, I think the answer is no, but is there any recourse back to the engineers because they screwed that one up?
First, this is not for, and none of this will fund Hooper. This is all for water, sewer, and drainage. It would be the laterals. So, yeah.
I mean, I guess kind of in the same line, you know, we've got some engineering fee in here for a future project, correct? You know, are we obligated to I think that engineer was selected because he was the district engineer, and there was no RFQ sent out for the Hooper Road construction. Are we obligated to continue, or actually, I think I'm concerned with us being obligated or electing to have the district engineer continue to do work out there when we've had some concerns. Should we not go into an RFQ for anything that the special district is doing to ensure that we're, one, diversifying the money that this district is spending to other engineers that may be able to provide service, and also you know, not rewarding an engineer that may not have served us as well as we'd like?
They vary from project to project. Hooper was a project that the city contracted with the engineers and hired and did the project, hired for the project. This issuance is going to get us paid back for a project that we did 2.5 years ago, and that's 1.2 million of it. And then the balance of it is going to be paying for the South Spectrum Boulevard between Promenade and Kirby Drive. And that's a project that we're funding, but the district is contracting, so the district chose the engineer, and the district's doing it. Now, obviously, we can, you know, obviously a lot of times the district's using our funds, and obviously, so we can visit with the district about that. So that's a possibility. But the Hooper Road project is not part of this, and that was already.
Was either the Hooper Road or this road, this new project, was the engineer selected through an RFQ process, or they were just hand selected?
Yes, correct.
And I presume it's the same district engineer that's doing this?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
So are we going to change anything from what we did that caused a mistake before? The way I see it is, are we communicating anything to the district engineer to say, we're going to keep a closer eye on you on this other project because there is a significant cost, and to be honest with you, a fair amount of embarrassment for me? Obviously, I wasn't involved in the discussion, but face a curb to face a curb is a huge elementary mistake.
Sure.
That is not something that an engineering firm that has been doing this for a while, that's not a mistake that they should make, and particularly not to that value. They're going to get another project, so there's not really a discouragement for them to put in implementation for them to have better QA/QC process. So what are we doing to either ensure that the QA/QC process is involved with, particularly when they're doing the quantities? We don't normally review quantities, we review plans. And what are we going to do to ensure that we have the opportunity to get more competency from other engineers that are serving this district, rather than just awarding projects to the district engineer with seemingly no recourse when they screw up?
Sure. Two things. We meet monthly with the district engineer to go over the projects. We do have a significant amount of work we're doing both privately and publicly in the lower Kirby district. So when we meet with them on Thursday, and the city and EDC staff meet with them to just coordinate both engineering and Mr. Epperson also meet with them. We can go over the concerns we had on the Hooper and the issues that we had with them on that. And then obviously when the city goes to do projects in the district, we don't, you know, we're free to RFQ and choose the engineers that we choose to do. So there's always that route too. So I think both of the things you're suggesting we can look at.
You know, personally, you know, if we're depending on where we are on this project, you know, if we've already made some commitments to the engineer, and I'll be right with you. I know the engineers. I know a ton of engineers there. I think they're a good firm, but I think they had a screw up, and I hope that doesn't continue. But isolating our only selection to this one engineer does not encourage them to institute a QA/QC process.
Sure.
you know, perhaps if we're too far down the road for this project and they continue to get a reward, then let's move forward with them. But I would like us to see for anything that district is doing, because there's still a lot of work there, that it be an RFQ, that they can serve as the reviewing entity, since they know all of the background to it, since they did the drainage report, they did all of that, and they can assist our staff with augmentation, similar to what I think Arcadis did for the water plant. But just saying it's yours no matter what, I think is not serving out of the taxpayers of Pearland or the taxpayers in that district as well as we would like.
Any other question or comment from council?
Yeah, me.
Woody?
I guess on this one, my concerns is the same thing that others have mentioned, and that's what I had a concern originally on that Hooper Road. It's not a big project, to be quite honest with you. And, you know, you had, what, 8 different change orders on the one project? You know, and normally, and I'm sure I did see the layout on everything, but, you know, you got a senior engineer that's over all of that, or project engineer, but then also you have more like a project manager overseeing that and coming in and looking at those different things that we're paying for them to do, you know, QA/QC. But it just kind of showed a big light out there, and like Trent said, you know, I know the company, I've known them for years, and I've never really, in all my years, I've never seen this come up on this size of a project, number of change orders being done on that. It's somebody was asleep at the wheel, to be quite honestly with you, on this, and not doing the reviews, even though they were being paid to do QA/QC reviews on this. So I've got the same concern that other people sitting over here on the council has at the same time. You get what you paid for, but, you know, I think that something on this, that number of change orders is astronomical. For a straight road. Yes, for this, for a small, you know, what you would consider not to be a very large project, really, for dollar amount. So, but yeah, that was a concern. I've got the information from the city manager over that when I asked it previously. So, but that's something I would like for us to watch and make sure we do the QA/QC on these projects. And like Trent says, you know, I'm kind of against coming in and, you know, awarding somebody with another contract when we've seen, you know, what has happened. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Robert?
Good.
Understand.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Council have any other questions? Did you clarify that for me? Yeah. Okay. Any other question or comment from council? Hearing none, we do have a motion second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Ordino?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Motion passed 7-0.
Wonderful. Moving back into our agenda, new business item number 2. Councilmember Reed, would you do the honor?
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action, resolution number R-2018-43, so moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report on this item.
Thanks, sir. The city's had in its capital improvement program relocation of fire station number 1, currently located at Old Alvin and McCard. The facility is a throwback to days when much different fire departments and requirements for staffing and equipment, et cetera. And it's frankly taken up real estate where we need to expand for public works. So all these things are coming together, and we must move fire station number 1. City has land already at the northeast corner of Old Alvin and McCard Road. We bid out this project for this replacement fire station, and the pricing came back higher than anticipated for a couple different reasons. We looked at that and decided that try to get the best pricing for the city. We put it back out on the street. We rejected those bids. Council did, you may recall, and we put it back on the street. And here we are tonight. We are recommending award to C.A. Walker that's qualified for the work, and the project is still over what had been anticipated in the CIP for budget, and but we are where we are, and we need to move forward. There's really the design elements and what's in the station, et cetera, to get something that will function and serve us long term. Really, nothing else of substance that we can see that we can cut out of that, and so are recommending the award, and we will need to supplement the budget with certificates of obligation that's described there to get this done. So this is for your award consideration tonight.
Okay, I think it's kind of interesting we call this Fire Station Number 1 because actually Fire Station Number 1 was built back in 1960s, 70s time frame. There is what is now called the barn at Orange Street and Old Alvin Road. And it's past its service area period and moving on into retirement. So we're replacing that one. It's a second generation item. Fire Station 1, second generation is what we ought to call that. But it's kind of interesting how long that other station had lasted and how much it served over the years before we have to replace it at a more appropriate location where it serves from the center of its service area. That information in the record. Council have any question or comment on this item at this point?
Yes, Mayor. I had a couple of things. On the selection, and let me start off. I'm comfortable with the who we're awarding it to. They're definitely they appear to be qualified and their lowest price. So I think that's definitely the way to go. But I have a couple of questions on the score sheet, just so I have my head wrapped around how we came to this conclusion. So there's a few of these items, particularly the last three. QA, I'm assuming that's quality assurance, but EMR and financial capacity. Can I get some better understanding as to what those, what EMR is and how we're judging financial capacity?
Well, first of all, let me just answer, Councilmember, your question on financial capacity. Their financial requests are put in, and then our financial department reviews those. So our CPA that we have reviews those to make sure that they're solvent. The other one on the EMR is their safety record. So that's put forth. Any construction company over a period of time will have an insurance rating. And so we always look at that. And usually the standard is it's 1 or less. Is they're having a safety record that is good. Usually those that are over 1 for an extended period of time are ones that are subject to more safety violations or potential accidents that are claims against their insurance. And so we take that and take a look at that because we do want to take a look at part of that is the safety record associated with the contractor as well because we want our job safe.
Fair enough. So when we have 2 of the bidders that score 0 on the EMR, we're saying that they have a record of having unsafe work environments?
We're stating in our criteria that anyone above a 1 gets a 0 for points.
Okay.
That's how our scoring criteria sets up. Then everybody else is then prorated off the lowest value given from the lowest number of the EMR.
And that language is in the RFP?
That is correct.
Okay. The other aspect of it, well, I'd say two things. One, I want to thank staff for their diligence in trying to push forward with this. I know that there's, the pricing on this put everybody in a tailspin. I don't know if it was avoidable. I doubted it was. It looks worse because it's a governmental project, but I think we just got caught in bad timing with respect to the price. And I want to commend Robert and your staff, Trent, your staff, for going back and getting this reworked and trying to get a lower value. I think it means a lot to the city. Where we are right now, based on what we've put in the packet, are we just going to assume, at least for the near future, that about $400 a square foot is going to be the value for a fire station?
Yes, sir. In our future future packages, we've actually budgeted a little bit more based off of inflation. We just want to make sure that the market is there. And then our recent interviews with architects that have happened is that those are the prices they're starting to see on a per square foot basis for fire departments in the market today.
Okay.
Council, have any additional comments or questions at this point?
I've just got one on clarification there on future expenditures down here. You've got construction management and testing contracts of $239,388. And I know we got the one coming up to Arcadis, but it's only 189. Is the balance of that 239, is that geotech or what?
That is correct, sir.
Is it somebody we already have on board? Or?
We are evaluating those that we've already have that are part of our pre-selection process.
Okay, so that's really kind of an estimate right now.
The remainder of that is correct.
Okay.
We're not anticipating all of that, but that is correct, is the estimate right now.
FF&E, 210,000. What does that include?
Well, that's the rest of everything that is not part of this project, so that'll be the furnishings and everything associated with the firefighters' needs in that building.
I'm just making sure it wasn't, a part of that for the contractor, providing that.
Those are separate, sir.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions from council at this point? Hearing none, we do have a motion second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Ordinal?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Motion passed 7-0.
Moving in our agenda to new business item number 3. Councilmember Ordinal, would you present this for our consideration?
Consideration and possible action, resolution number R 2018-45, so moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and we're in discussion. Staff report.
Thanks, sir. And as was just alluded to, associated with that fire station number 1, as a building structure, not something that we typically would do, inspect and manage ourselves. We are seeking this help with Arcadis to do the construction management inspection and oversee that and make sure everything's put up properly.
Okay. Does council have any question or comment on this item?
Mayor?
Yes?
I guess the question, from what I can tell in round figures, we're paying $190K for essentially one person for less than a year. At what point does it make sense to bring something like this in-house? I gotta imagine if we hired somebody, it wouldn't be a $190K salary.
As we'd like to, yes, eventually we'd like to be able to start doing those things in-house, but it's expertise and also having someone out there full-time. It also includes full-time inspection as well on the vertical side. So we want to make sure that the station is built correctly and have that oversight at all times. So that's including an inspector that's full-time and also construction management to make sure that's going as well.
When we get bigger, we're going to be able to do a lot more in-house.
It is more than one person, sir. So just to answer that question, there is, like I said, inspections, inspectors, and also services associated with that.
So how does that work? How does that work if the building is constructed and then we find out that there's something not right with it? Where does the ownership go? Do we just eat the cost, or does ownership go back to this project manager?
I think ownership is among all, but it'll be with the contractor as well as our inspector that's on site at all times.
And so we won't have to pay?
Can't answer that question if it's an unforeseen, but our question that we have is that we will do everything we can to mitigate that so that it is built in accordance with the plans and specifications.
Yeah, that will end up being obviously a very fact-specific question, and as they arise, as far as who's culpable for whatever the mistake, if there is a mistake made in the construction process, and so it's sort of difficult to look into a crystal ball.
So two things: AC and fire suppression. Pay attention to those.
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Little.
Robert, I heard you mention inspectors. The city has inspectors that regularly go out and make sure that things are being done. So in addition to them, we have to hire an outside contractor to make sure that the facility is constructed properly. Is that normal in these type of construction projects? It is in ours because of the sensitivity and the nature of our projects that we want to make sure that they are oversight continuously and make sure that we are inspecting those correctly on all times. Yes, our building officials are fantastic and they do a fantastic job, but they also have the entire city to look at as well. We want to make sure that we are focused on this project as well as a entity that will be there at all times.
So, maybe just for clarifications, so we're considering this a one-time intermittent staff up of our building department to deal with concentrated focus on this fire station and only this fire station. It's not a sign that we have, or we're not anticipating that we have so much of this work that we need that dedicated staff long-term? Or is it just, right now, this is just our focus, we want to get through this project and see how things go?
I'll take the latter on that, council member. Is that yes, would I like to have the expertise in-house? Correct. But as of right now, this is what we need to do to be able to get this done.
But this is building and also site, so it's not just the building officials, it's also engineering inspectors that are going to be out there and dedicate time to the concrete pour, which is not normally done. We don't normally look at that for site development projects. Make sure all the storm sewer, everything is put in place. So they're going to be doing both of those.
Correct. It's full site development, full project.
So the one question I have, appreciate you answering that. One question I have, I couldn't tell from the package, and I probably should have called early and just asked for the site plan, but is the main driveway that comes out for the three doors, does that line up with the existing median cut? So there's an existing median cut at Barbara Cockrell that lines up with their driveway.
The driveway is all interfaced directly off of Old Alvin. We have no connection to McCart.
Okay, so when I'm looking at the front of the building, it's turned and it faces Old Alvin. So, okay, so it faces west and not south.
Correct.
Okay. Well, all right, that works perfect. Thank you. Sorry. Yes, sir.
I guess, Trent, you mentioned there's more than one inspector or whatever. When I go through here and look at this in the summary, I mean, they showed one construction inspector and then a project manager.
I was just basically referring to it's more than just one person. There's typically in our construction management contracts, there's inspectors, and then there's the actual construction manager that handles a lot of the paperwork and the other interactions with the contractor. And just quickly to differentiate between the inspections done here versus what our building inspectors do, they are typically inspecting at a point in time when it's called for an inspection. And so this is actually more day-to-day, watching what the contractor's doing in between those particular inspection points that our building inspectors do.
Yeah, this will be a little bit more involved in it. But when I go down through here and look and see, you get the construction manager, and he's loaded pretty well all hours on that through there. And then the project manager is very light in the number of hours that's presented right here. What a good difference in pay. So from 190 an hour billing rate versus 95 on there. But I didn't see any more other than if they're just using the construction inspector, whoever's out there, that's what the billing rate will be. It could be more than one at a period of time.
More the cheaper guy.
Huh?
More the cheaper guy.
Council, have any other question or comment?
So that was the only thing that I had. Of course, I've known Buddy Barnes for years, so I mean, not saying he sort of take advantage of it, but I just, the way it was broken out and the way it was loaded, it didn't really come in detail that on there, Robert. I mean, that's just, looking at it. And you got quite a bit of time and overtime.
Does that complete your comments,
Yeah, I guess so.
Council, have any other comment or question on this item? Hearing none, we do have a motion second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Ordino.
Aye.
Councilmember Little.
Aye.
Councilmember Perez.
Aye.
Councilmember Owens.
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone? Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed? Motion passed 7-0.
Moving in our new business item, part of the agenda, item number 4. Councilmember Little, would you do the honor?
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action, resolution number R 2018-48. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
To get power to this fire station, we've got a easement with CenterPoint, and need your consideration for that. If we don't do this, what you just did won't mean much, so.
Okay.
He's done. Go ahead.
Wait, are we through?
Yeah.
Not much to report, Mayor.
Yeah. Not much to report, okay. We do have motion second on the floor here, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Perez?
Can't believe we stopped so fast.
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Ordino?
Aye.
Councilmember Little is absent from the chambers. It passed 6-0.
Moving in our agenda to new business item number 5. Councilmember Owens, would you do the honor?
Mayor, if I could, in conformance with the ethical ordinance, I'm going to excuse myself from the chamber as I have a relationship with the contractor that's being awarded this.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Perez excuse himself, recuses himself.
R 2018-44, I so moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. We're in discussion. Council staff report.
Thanks, sir. Likewise, in our planning for fire operations as well as our CIP, the city has land on Shadow Creek Parkway and Reflection Bay that been long cited for an additional fire station. We've gone over this in budget and some other contexts, but we are not so much future, but right now in need of additional fire EMS resources in this area. We need this station to commence construction and be occupied and get the equipment for that so that we can serve the community. The contract before you tonight is a professional services for the design, which will allow us to go forward and then eventually construct. There's quite a bit of background information about the station and the needs for that in the background packet, just to give you a comfort level and give you some of the background for that.
Council have any question or comment on this item at this point?
Robert, yes, sir. Just break down your cost for me on that.
Does that complete your report?
Okay. Robert's got a.
Okay, Dick. This gets off the clock.
Councilman Owen, could you just define your question for me, please?
Yeah, I see your cost on the engineering and everything here. Just kind of give me a breakdown, additional services on there for donor, architect, and I guess really, let me look over here, on the budget that you got in there, you're talking about engineering, 1.1 million. Does that include site and everything?
The architect's cost estimate for his design services is as listed. We have budget in there for more than that, because that was what was budgeted during the time when we developed this, but the expenditure required is $622,000 for all design services to get us all the way through the project.
All righty, thank you.
Okay. Any other question or comment by council?
Do we know what we're asking this fire station to look like? Or are we leaving that up to the design company?
In terms of aesthetics portion,
Yes.
Councilman Moore, with regards to that, we've asked the architect to take a look in the surrounding area to provide us some renderings as we go along, then so that it can be reviewed and approved in terms of what the exterior would look like.
So we don't have it defined at this moment, but that's part of the planning process and part of the rendering and early design.
Okay. I didn't know if there was direction specifically given to them or not, so.
I think that the architect would have designed it around the staffing that we proposed to put there, basically. So, and I'm not sure. I can't remember how many individuals that will be in the station.
We have quite a few, according to this being one of our largest, the largest station that we'll have. With that, taking a look at 2 4-person engine crews, a 4-person ladder crew, a 2-person ambulance, and then of course associated personnel from there. So it'll be a pretty large staff group. But as I answered Councilman Moore too, as regards the way it looks, is that that'll be decided and discussed during that time.
But I mean, it'll be a 2-story facility.
No, it'll still stay single story at the request.
It's going to be 1 story? Okay.
Yes, sir. At the request of Chief Riley.
Okay, good, super. Does council have any other question or comment? Hearing none, we do have a motion second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone? Aye. Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed? Aye. Councilmember Ordino?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
And Councilmember Perez is absent from the chambers. Motion passed 6-0.
Okay, moving to item number 9 on our collective agendas. Mayor, council issues for future city council agendas. Does any council members have any questions for future? Yeah, okay. Well, it says not on the agenda, but sometimes people may have an idea between now and the time I got the copy, so I always like to give all an opportunity to speak. Moving in our agenda to executive session under Texas Government Code Section 551.071, consultation with city attorney regarding pending and potential litigation related to property acquisition, municipal boundary adjustments, and environmental issues. And also under Section 551.074 for personnel matters regarding the annual evaluation of our city manager. Obviously, we can discuss these items in executive session with staff and other members that are related to the issue, but we cannot make a decision in executive session. It must be brought back to open session, and when we do bring it back, we will have item number 6 and 7 for council consideration, so should they so desire. So at this time, we will recess into executive session at 7:45. The council has returned from executive session at 9:39. Moving in our agenda to new business item number 6, consideration possible action regarding pending and potential litigation and so forth for this.
Yes, Mayor, I'm going to be recommending a motion for council to consider, and then I believe after that there will be another motion made by Councilmember Carbone. The first motion I would recommend would be authorizing staff to proceed with the acquisition of right-of-way for the Max Road project as discussed in executive session.
Second. Second.
Okay, Mr. Secretary, we do have a motion second on. We have
Second.
Yeah.
Okay, Derek, and then
We have a motion second on the floor. Mr. Secretary, for that one.
Councilmember Carbone? Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed? Aye. Councilmember Ordino?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez? Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Motion passed 7-0.
Okay, you have a second one?
Yep, Mayor, I'd like to make a motion directing staff to proceed to prepare an ordinance repealing the annexation of repealing the annexation ordinance of areas A and L, along with developing a transition plan to end the city emergency services in area A and L. So moved.
Second.
Have a motion. Have any question or comment on that item? Hearing none, we do have a motion second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Ordino?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Motion passed 7-0.
Okay. Moving to new business item number 7,
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adjust the city manager's salary as discussed in exec session.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any question or comment on this item, Council? We have none. Mr. Secretary, we do have motion second on the floor.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Ordino?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Motion passed 7-0.
Is that complete?
Yes, sir, complete.
Okay, that completes our agenda as a result of both the regular meeting, council meeting, and then the executive session. And both of those are adjourned at 9:42.